I'm Pete Jones. I'm part of the Wellesley Veterans Council here in town, and also the commander of American Legion Post 72. And this is a great event that we're having today. It started from the Bullard's Tavern, which was down off of Washington Street, just down about a half a mile from here. And those folks, Bullard and his son, and 16 total soldiers marched from Bullard's Tavern by Wellesley College all the way into Lexington and Concord, and it was quite a skirmish they had there, and they lost a lot of military personnel in that skirmish. And today what we're doing here at the Village Church is we'll have a recognition of that battle and of the 16 individuals that are buried here in the cemetery from this area.
Good morning, I'm Brad Bidbender, and I'll be the Master of Ceremonies for this, and thank you very much for your attention and your support on the start of this. For those of us of a certain age who have been watching Disney movies, let me set the context of what I'm wearing, okay? What you are seeing, George Washington, commander of the Continental Army, in 1777 established the color and the pattern of the Continental Army uniform. What we are wearing and the color guard is wearing is the artillery unit of the Continental Army, and specifically a Massachusetts artillery unit. Each of the 13 colonies, there was some variation in uniforms. As you probably know, example, Pennsylvania, there was a lot of brown in their uniforms. Typically, many of the paintings that you see, what you see what we are wearing, no doubt that would have been a Massachusetts unit. With that, waiting for our color guard to get in position. Commander Tortolock, would you please advance the color guard to the monument?
Color guard, attention! Soldier, you're a fire line. Right, left, forward, march! Color guard, halt, left, right.
Commander Tortolock, would you please deliver a poem, a toast to the flag?
A toast to the most glorious flag to ever fly over land, sea, air, and through the vastness of space. Here's to the red of it. There's not a thread of it, no nor a shred of it, in all the spread of it from foot to head. But heroes bled for it, face, steel, and lead for it, precious blood shed for it, bathing it red. Here's to the white of it, thrilled by the sight of it. Who knows the right of it, but feels the might of it through day and night. Womanhood cared for it, made manhood dare for it. Purity's prayer for it keeps it so white. Here's to the blue of it, beauteous view of it, heavenly hue of it, star-spangled dew of it, constant and true. Diadems gleam for it, state stands supreme for it. Liberty's beam for it, brightens the blue. Here's to the whole of it, the stars, strength and pole of it, the body and soul of it. Oh, in the roll of it, sun shining through. Hearts in accord for it, swear by the sword for it, thanking the Lord for it. Red, white, and blue.
Welcome to all of our distinguished guests, and thank you to the Colonel Henry Knox Artillery Regiment Color Guard for being with us today. Let us pray. Holy One, hallow our time as we remember with gratitude those who fought for ideals in which we live today. Help us to remember and learn from our history, that we might keep alive its ideals. Bless this time, bless this remembering, and bless this ground where lives are remembered in perpetuity. Amen.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
I'm going to give some opening remarks about this event and give context to our soldiers that we have here. Today is a historic day. We are now have in place, in care of the Wellesley Village Church Cemetery, a permanent public record to shine light on 16 veterans of America's War for Independence. Their names now can be seen here by future generations visiting the cemetery, both the public and descendant families. Their patriot names will not be forgotten for their contribution 250 years ago. Today, we are on the eve of the 250th anniversary when citizens of Massachusetts on April 19th, 1775, made a profound choice of their citizenship in government. A choice of either self-determination and elected democracy or to remain subjects to a distant British Parliament and loyalty to a head of state whose claim is by accident of birth. This began a change of events that drew in as allies the countries of France, Spain, the Republic of Holland, and 13 of the 15 North American colonies in a war against Great Britain. It ended in victory for the Allies on September 3rd, 1783. The Treaty of Paris at Versailles. Great Britain, in signing the treaty, recognized the 13 North American colonies were now a sovereign nation of the United States. Prior to 1881, the town of Wellesley was known as West Needham. Our veterans' West Needham militia responded to the alarm of Lexington and Concord on April 19th. They engaged the British Army during their return to Boston on Battle Road. They also mustered at the Battle of Bunker Hill, June 1775. During their service, the West Needham militia would have likely known fellow militia soldiers of color from surrounding towns. Published this year in 2024, research from Massachusetts Archives These soldiers were collectively identified in anticipation of the 250th anniversary. The Battle of Lexington and Concord. 87 known African American and Indigenous American members and town militias responded. The Battle of Bunker Hill, 195 members of color identified in militia companies. Although not buried here, the veterans of the West Needham militia could have likely known from the nearby towns the following comrades in arms. Prince Boylston, African American from Brookline. Isaac Comecho, Nipmuc Tribe Indian from Sherburne. James Anthony, Narragansett Tribe Indian from Natick. Thomas Doherty, African American from Natick. Now to the present. Sharing with you a brief story, the inspiration for today's monument and journey leading up to it. On May 23rd, 2021, the story began. Wife Patty Hubble, Brad Harding, and I were standing in the cemetery at the headstone of the West Needham militia captain, Aaron Smith, discussing the repair of a war veteran grave marker placed there in 1898 by the Sons of the American Revolution Massachusetts Society. Brad Harding had informed that he had the record of a year 2015 Eagle Scout project by Addison Bowden that documented in the church cemetery's care 16 veterans of the War of Independence. Yes, we do have a photograph of that moment. From that fact, connections led to the Rev 250 anniversary project by the Massachusetts Society Sons of the American Revolution with its 5 chapters. The goal, marking the burial grounds with a commemorative bronze plaque recognizing Patriot veterans that had not been perpetually identified to the public. Each of the 5 chapters in rotation, the membership approves and sponsors a burial ground bronze plaque marking. The Boston chapter approved the nomination of this cemetery. The bronze plaques were funded by the National SAR George Washington Endowment Foundation. The granite stone monument and its installation was approved and funded by the Wellesley Church leadership. My remarks in closing, I want to recognize the following key contributors who collectively made today's historic dedication possible. Please hold your applause of appreciation to the end. Brad Harding, church historian and cemetery administration. Senior pastor, Dr. Reverend Sarah Sache Butter. The village church former moderators, Leif Haley, Cynthia Seabold, John Snyder, Kathy Schleyer. Joseph Gother, Massachusetts SER Awards Committee Chairman. Joe obtained the funding for the bronze plaque from the George Washington Endowment Fund and contracted with the foundry to have it made. Thomas Merrill, who's president of the Boston chapter of the Massachusetts Society of SAR. The church ad hoc committee for this monument. Kathy Schleyer, Jim Mongiorno, John Schneider, Brad Hardy, and myself, project coordinator. Also, Sheila and Todd Duffy, the business managers for the monument company Tribute and Stone of Rentham, Massachusetts. They contracted the assembly of the granite monument and the bronze plaque and the final installation where you see it today. And Emilio Del Vecchio, the church facility manager, who physically assisted Todd Duffy with his final installation of the stone monument on April 22nd of this year. And finally, Associate Pastor Stacy Swain, chairperson for the Dedication Planning Committee, and the members included Pete Jones, commander of American Legion Post 72 in the town of Wellesley Veterans Council, and Christopher Tortolak, vice president of Massachusetts SCR and commander of the Colonel Henry Knox Artillery Regimental Color Guard. Thank you very much for your support. Please do applaud. Now for the unveiling of the monument, I would invite Pete Jones, commander of the American Legion Post 72, and Commander Chris Tortolak to join him. Thank you, gentlemen. And Brad Harding, would you please speak to our 16 veterans?
It didn't start on April 19th, 1775, the date we all learned in school, to some the beginning of our country, and noted by the words, "the shot heard round the world." The actual beginning was as far back as the start of the 18th century, when the great-grandchildren of those first pilgrims, who 3/4 of a century earlier had come here. What started as a desire to worship freely had become a widespread sense that the British Crown viewed the colonists as disloyal. And for its part, the Crown after 1700 was making life in the colonies more difficult. Lumber cut in New Hampshire was to build a ship here in the colonies had to be labeled a product of England. Some of it even had to be shipped there first and then returned in order to be used. The official currency, the British pound, was not always available for people to pay debts. And some colonists held it in disrepute. I wonder why. As an alternative, local banks started to issue their own currency, which, understandably, was not widely trusted. Barter amongst neighbors, often managed in the local tavern, was more trustworthy. Those living in West Needham, along with others in the colonies, felt resentment to such cavalier treatment as mere disloyal colonists. It was a bitter topic of conversation going on day by day. So nothing about April 19th was really new. Breaking news in those days took a day or two to reach West Needham. But we can believe that most folks expected something would soon occur that would be more than just a skirmish of gunfire. Militias were organized in many towns, and there was, until then, no army as we know it now. Nevertheless, those who cared were ready. For those 16 citizens of West Needham, the ready and reliable ones who are memorialized here, I want to remember them with a few sentences about each one. If you'd like to follow on the back of the sheet that you got, you'll see an image of the tablet. Born in 1707, Josiah Ware was the oldest in the group honored on the tablet. And as a farmer, he had a long experience with annoyances of colonial rule. He joined the Needham Minutemen, fought in Lexington and Concord, and was a private in the Army. He outlived 4 wives, and son Daniel, also named on the tablet, was born to Mehitabel, Josiah's 3rd wife, who herself had previously become a widow. Ephraim Bullard Sr., also older and wiser to the trouble caused by the crown, was a hogreave, a fence viewer, a constable, and a Needham selectman. Since many farms and homesteads had livestock, pigs and chickens and cows, and as we heard its sermon, horses, a hogreave was the official whose job it was to wrangle the animals back home when they got loose. Bullard was also a member of the committee to build a new meeting house, which, by the way, finally stood on this very ground. He also kept a tavern on land that is now part of Wellesley College. He was among the first to relieve the alarm that for what was to occur in Lexington. Sergeant Ephraim Stevens, also of the Minutemen, who then served during the following siege at Boston, was married to Sybil Gay. Together they raised 11 children in a time when nearly half the children born did not live beyond the age of 15. Sergeant Stevens was a member of the First Church in Needham, and then this church when it was organized in 1798. On the Wednesday of the Lexington alarm, Captain Aaron Smith was a commander of the West Needham militia. When not in uniform, he was a hogreave, a deer reeve, a surveyor of highways, a fence viewer, a selectman, and a school committee man. In the 18th century, all of Needham, which then extended to Natick, had fewer than 2,000 inhabitants. It was common for a well-respected citizen to have several official responsibilities. A deer reeve then would be a game warden today. Joseph Daniels, at age 39, a sergeant in the West Company, filled most days as a field driver and surveyor. 1775 was marked by the fighting in Lexington and Concord, as well as the deaths of his wife and 7 children. He became a single parent and a widower, whose grief was stiffened by the reality that infectious disease was a silent threat to every growing family. Ephraim Bullard, Jr., probably made his father proud when he joined the militia as a drummer, though it's possible he was simply following his mother's orders. Mothers can do that. He requited them both when he rose to the rank of captain. He then served in education, tasked to recruit teachers and build and repair schoolhouses. He became a selectman and finally a tax collector. By being 26, Samuel Pratt was at the high end of the average age for those in the West Militia. He knew everyone in the company by name. Once done with his active military service, he served as a church deacon and a school committee man. And having married Hepzibah Gay, they birthed 8 children. 1 died in infancy, and their last child lived only to age 20. Timothy Hunting was born in 1753, so he was 22 when he signed on to the West Company. And he became corporal after doing his turn at Lexington. Little is recorded about his occupation following the war, but he was known for his honesty, his industry, and his benevolence. He lived to see George Washington become president in 1783. Jacob Lyon became a leather worker, and except for interruptions with serving terms as a career soldier, he served at the Siege of Boston, Bunker Hill, Springfield, and then Bedford, New York. On April 19th, Daniel Ware was 20 years old. The son of Josiah, who I mentioned earlier, Daniel certainly had an example to follow, and he joined Captain Aaron Smith's company at Lexington, then a year later at York. He held civic positions as a hogreave, constable, and town clerk. He also served a term as fence viewer, a position that still exists today in many rural communities. When fences separating pastures become broken, the fence viewer monitors the discussion about which landowner is responsible to fix the fence. Always respected, the fence viewer is often a peacemaker. Daniel's reputation was such that he became a justice of the peace and therefore was allowed to use the title Esquire. Another justice of the peace, after serving in his father's militia company, was Aaron Smith Jr., joining at age 19. Later on, he was also the town moderator and a grocer who became wealthy. In 1820, Aaron was a delegate to the Massachusetts Constitutional Convention. Of all those listed on the marker, Ebenezer Hunting was the only one to give up his life in battle. Right after Lexington and Concord, he was engaged in the siege at Boston, followed by Ticonderoga and York. He then enlisted in Canada, where he died from musket fire at age 22. When he was 15, Benoni Muzzy became a private in the West Company, and as a civilian later on, he was a field driver. He married Lucy Lewis, and they were parents of 5 children, 3 of whom were lost to infectious disease, likely tuberculosis, within a span of 10 days. Elizabeth was an infant, the youngest, of course. Childhood mortality was one reason why babies were often baptized at home soon after being born. Because he was 12 years old on the day of the fighting in Lexington and Concord, the active role played by Samuel Greenwood is not clear beyond the fact that he was part of the Minutemen. Since a typical musket was longer than a young boy was tall, he could have been a messenger, a role critical to the success of any military action. Samuel later became a field driver and a fence viewer, and he was known throughout Needham as a faithful church member. Also 12 years of age, on April 19th, was Thomas Eustace, likely a drummer or a water carrier. Later on, he was a deacon in the West Needham Church, and he lived until 1809, well after the 13 colonies had become the original United States. Captain Abel Stevens was born in 1769. Since he was only 7 years old when the British marched on Lexington, his joining the West Company of the militia occurred in 1787. In civilian life, he became the owner of land in both Needham and Natick. With his wife, Hadassah, their child, baptized with his name, died at age 3. As I said at the start, it didn't all begin on April 19th, 1775. And it didn't really end when the muskets and the cannons fell silent later on. These 16 men, with their fellow militia members from many other New England towns, all knew it. Ordinary folks, born mostly to farm life, they were, in their time, talented and responsible members of the West Needham community. Though one neighbor's house may have been too far away from next door to be seen, they all looked after one another. The important reasons for resisting the British Crown were well understood, and those of a senior age especially also knew that their actions would affect the generations who would follow. For a while, all of those honored today were soldiers who sought no glory beyond a call to serve with bravery and honest commitment to a future beyond themselves. And the records are sufficient to show that beyond Lexington Concord, just as beyond any of the wars that date our history, the common sense of destiny made these soldiers faithful worshipers. We can therefore understand why these 16 are memorialized here in this churchyard. Soldiers they all were, stepping up when called for weeks, even months, but throughout all the years of life, each one was a child of God. Thank you.
Now for the benediction, I invite Reverend Dr. Sarah Sache Butter.
The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face to shine upon us. The Lord look upon us with favor and grant us peace. May we be those who pray in the words of the prophet Isaiah, for a time when we shall beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks, a time when nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and we shall learn war no more. Come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Amen.
Before we close the proceedings, the Colonel Henry Knox Regimental Color Guard will do a military salute to our 16 veterans, and I'll leave Sarah Butter to following the musket salute to close the proceedings. In the meantime, I'm going to grab my musket and join the ranks.
Prepare to prime and load, prime and load. Hey, ready? Reset! Fire! Prepare to prime and load, prime and load. Shoulder your fire lock. Hey, ready? Reset! Fire! Prepare to prime and load, prime and load. Shoulder your fire lock. Hey, ready? Reset! Fire! Shoulder your fire lock. Secure your fire lock. Shoulder your fire lock. Shot! Hand! Right, face! 6 steps forward, march! Left, face! snow, you can see how many of them did in fire. Imagine going into battle like that. I can't. Thank you very much.
This concludes our time of solemn remembrance. You're all invited to join in Fellowship Hall where a luncheon awaits.
I did put it.